Ukraine has changed significantly. For the first few months, not only did I have to compose myself, but also to adapt to all the changes, to grasp the Ukrainian information flow. I really like that Ukraine is becoming, and has already become in many ways, a country of free people.
Why do you think so? Were they not free before 2014 when you were captured at the Ukrainian-Russian border?
When I joined the National Liberation Movement in the late 1980s, and then, when the nationalist political organization UNAUNSO began to form, we had a big dream to teach Ukrainians to struggle, to give them an impulse to gain personal freedom, to teach them that rights are not given but taken. Now Ukrainians know how to fight and have a taste for freedom. They realize that no one will give them their rights. They still need to learn responsibility, to realize that Ukraine is a republic, and the republic means the power of the people. It is not about being faithful to the king as defined in Russia, no. A citizen is a co-owner of his country. Now, both in politics and in power, generations are changing. Instead of the people of my generation, and slightly older people, who have ruled this country for almost 30 years and brought it to its present state, the younger generation of the 80s and 90s is coming. I see them as very high quality. I believe that they have tremendous energy and prospects. Of course, it is bad that in Ukraine there are no institutions for creating a political elite. Now, the task of all progressive, reasonable forces of Ukraine is to channel this youth energy and the new dynamics in a constructive way.
Whose idea was it that you go to Russia? And why did you have to go there? For everyone, it looks very strange. You, the person who was with the nationalist political organization UNAUNSO, who was well known in these circles, and the UNAUNSO was hated in Russia. The Euromaidan protests are taking place. Soon there will be the annexation of Crimea, and you are also the deputy head of the right sector, which is also hated and demonized by all the Russian TV channels. And for some reason, you are going to Russia. This is a completely strange and absurd story.
At that time, the right sector was of great interest to the world. At the end of February 2014, the first meeting with the representative of foreign state, the ambassador of Israel, took place. There was a pressing issue of anti-Semitism and xenophobia, and the leader of right sector, Dmytro Yarosh, and I found common ground with the ambassador in just 10 minutes. And, at the same meeting, they prepared a statement, which was then posted on the website of the Israeli embassy in Ukraine, that the right sector has no xenophobia or anti-Semitism, that it is a normal political force in the process of formation. After that, we had 3-5 meetings every day, with ambassadors from different countries, not only from Europe, but from all over the world. At the time, we had quite a big authority and influence. Back then, Ukraine was in a state of transition to the formation of a new government. Of course, we had a lot of interest because we were influencing the political situation, the government. But, at that moment, we are having a conflict in Crimea, the Russians are seizing Crimea, and large forces of the Russian army are at our eastern borders, so we are on the verge of war. And here, head of right sector organization in Kiev, Vyacheslav Forsa, says his acquaintance had served with Putin for a long time. They still remain in contact, and it is in the Kremlin's interest to meet and negotiate with the right sector. It was not surprising to us. My problem is that since the late 1990s I have been completely uninterested in Russia, and I did not know to what extent this was a territory of lawlessness. When I was traveling to Russia, I asked myself, as a normal person living in the 21st century, what are the threats? There are no criminal cases against me, because I have not been to Russia. How can someone take a citizen of another state and fabricate a criminal case against him? For me, it was savagery. I could not even believe that it was possible.
Yes, there were no such cases before. You were the first.
So I thought, the only thing that could threaten me is that I would be expelled from this country or not allowed in, and that's it. I only anticipated those threats. In the situation where we were on the verge of war, of course, we saw this as a chance to stop the aggression. If a dialogue begins, it is a chance to stop the aggression. And we also bought into the fact that it was supposed to be the first meeting, an extremely important and relevant one, because it could lead to the next meeting between Putin and Yarosh, which was to take place somewhere in the territory of Europe. Ukraine is gradually making very precise steps to establishing its own statehood, and the fact that the Russians started the war against Ukraine has very much matured the Ukrainians. It is sad for me to say this, because this is happening at the cost of serious losses. But let's just look at what Ukraine was like before this war. I remember the accusations addressed at us when we spoke harshly against Moscow, because they said, Russians are our brothers, but brothers have brought their brotherly love, dear Ukrainians. I feel for President Zelenskyy in his certainty that he and the Kremlin will be able to find common ground and achieve peace. That is naivety, and I think it will pass in the near future. But I sympathize with him in his naivety. Ukraine does not need peace at any cost. Ukraine should have a clear goal: the development of the Ukrainian state, the development of Ukraine as such. In general, why do we need a state? Why do we, Ukrainians, need a state? If we unite in a state, this union must have some purpose. For me, the main purpose of the state is the constant spiritual, cultural, material development of Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, and every citizen of Ukraine. And this should be stated to our political figures, including the president, as the main goal of their performance. We will not reach peace with today's Moscow. Everything that happens, all the agreements, conferences, all this fiction can only end with a long-term or short-term truce. One has to understand that the war ends with either victory or defeat. You Ukrainians, I say you, because at that time I was not in Ukraine, you do not realize how you defeated Moscow in 2014. You have won a tremendous victory, and you need to be aware of this. They expected that after LPR and DPR, People's Republics in Kharkiv, Odessa, Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions would follow. Separatist movements began in Bessarabia, in Transcarpathia. There was even a development of the program for proclaiming the Western People's Republic in Lviv. A FSB general told me this in 2014. It was an acting FSB general who introduced himself as Roman Grigorovich. He told me 3 times how they would divide Ukraine along the Dnipro River and will leave the left bank to themselves and the right bank to the Poles. And he said they just don't know whose Kiev should be. Leave it for themselves or let Poland take it. When he met with me for the last time in September 2014, I was expecting him to stick with his story, but he was silent. Then I asked him what was happening in the Donbass. He told me, "We have decided to set a little armistice. There are too many losses. We need to do something. We are going to the Minsk talk." That's when I realized that the Kremlin had lost.
Do you plan to create another patriotic organization or party in Ukraine, or maybe join one? Have you had offers?
I'm currently working on the creation of the Ukraine Development Center, which I worked on before the Euromaidan protests. We have already managed to do some things. In the future, a broad socio-political movement should be formed around this center. It should form politicians and our national political elite, seek power, develop ideas. The first thing the Ukraine Development Center should do is form a true Ukrainian system. We need to form our social Ukrainian system, on the basis of which the Ukrainian state will be reformed. I see a healthy family, dominated by love for each other, where everyone takes their place and benefits the family as a prototype of this social system. This family is run by parents who see the continued development of the family as a whole and each member of the family as the purpose of their lives.